Hi everyone and welcome to my video. Today I'm going to show you the different greens that I've collected over the years that I like to use. I'm just going to take a small brush. This is my Casaneo Da Vinci brush, size 4. I've got some clean water here. I've got different greens in different palettes, so that hence I've got 2 palettes out today. But this is a quick exercise just to show you the colours that I use. So the first green I want to show you is in this small palette over here, and it's Sap Green. So it looks really dark actually in the palette, but when you bring the pigment and mix it with water, it's a beautiful, beautiful green. It's a lovely fresh colour. So if I swatch that for you, you can see it's lovely and fresh. You can get some really nice darks with this as well if you use it in a much more concentrated consistency. So if I just work that up there in the palette, you can get a really nice dark from it as well. So all these greens that I'm going to show you today, you can add primaries to and alter those colours if necessary. So if I were to add, for example, the French Ultramarine Blue, then I could darken that quite nicely, or a touch of red, and you would actually get a slightly more muted green. But that's not what I'm going to do in this section of the video. We'll move on to that a little bit later on. So this one was the Sap Green. The next green I have in this particular palette is called Gold Green. Sorry, Green Gold. Get that the right way round. So this is really, really nice. It's a beautiful sort of lovely yellow green colour, which is great for landscapes and things. So if I swatch that here for you, just add a little more water to it. It's absolutely gorgeous. And in a concentrated application, if I mix that up, it gives a beautiful sort of vivid colour. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's got that gold to it, of course, which is fabulous. So then I'm going to move across to this palette over here. I will begin with this colour, which is a really strong colour, and sometimes you will get this in a beginner's set often, but as you can see, very, very, very intense colour this one. This one's called Veridian, and it's quite blue, slightly turquoise as well. Just add a bit of water to that. It's a really nice colour. If I were to add a little bit of blue, say Coeruleum Blue, to that, we would get a beautiful turquoise. So that's the Veridian. If I were to make a more intense mix, so much more highly pigmented mix, it's much thicker on my brush now, I can achieve a really lovely dark green colour there. Absolutely gorgeous. It reminds me of kind of pine trees, that kind of real dark green, like Leylandi kind of thing. So that's great for that. So that's the third green in my palette. I also have a colour over here which is Midnight Green, which is a nice, interesting colour. Again, this is quite an intense, but it's much more muted if I show you here. I really, really like this green. I find it much more natural to work with. That Veridian here is quite powerful, quite acidic. I prefer to use slightly more natural tones, and I find that this Midnight Green gives me a beautiful mid green colour that I like to use often. So if I just quickly mix up a more concentrated version, then you can see, you can get some really nice darks with that, but it's still very natural in tone. Let's just lighten up this section. I think I overdid it there with the pigment, so let's lighten that up so it's similar to the other ones I've got on my swatch. Okay, so the final colour that I have, I inherited from, I think it was my grandmother, and it's over here in my palette. This one is called Country Olive. Again, it's one that I tend to go to. Very natural again. Similar to the first colour that I mixed, the Sap Green. This one I suppose is slightly more yellow, so let's swatch that. Yeah, it's lovely. It's sort of halfway between the green gold and the Sap Green that I did at first, but I really like this olive colour. It's actually Country Olive. I think it's a Winsor & Newton colour, and there we go. I'll just mix up a concentrated application. Excuse my phone there, that's a message from somebody. So this is nice. It's slightly opaque if you mix it thickly, but again it's got those neutral tones running through it, which I really like. So with those 5 greens there, you can see that the Veridian is particularly vivid, bright, has a strong colour, and I think it's the one that I use least out of those 4 colours that are in my palette. Okay, so I have labelled those greens now. So I showed you the Sap Green, Green Gold, Veridian, Midnight Green and Country Olive. So those are the greens that I can go to if I don't want to mix my colours. But I really want to teach you how you can create some natural looking greens using the primary colours, because this is a fantastic base for you to build on. These are foundation skills that are really quite useful, especially when you're starting out, because you don't want to have to go out and buy 10 greens, 10 purples, that kind of thing. You want to be able to mix the colour, the perfect colour that you're after for your particular painting, using those primary colours. And therefore, you know, as a starter set, you can go out and choose yourself 6 colours, 2 reds, 2 yellows and 2 blues, which is what I have here. So I have my warm colours and my cool colours. So I have Cadmium Yellow, Cadmium Red, French Ultramarine Blue, those are my warm colours. I have Lemon Yellow, Crimson Red, and that's the Alizarin Crimson, and also Coeruleum Blue. So those are my cool primary colours. I seem to have something in my crimson which looks like a little seed's blown in or something like that. So what I want to do really is show you several greens that you can easily mix using these shades, these colours here. So I'm going to take a brush and give you some basics. If you want to mix a dark green, then you want to start off with the blue colour. So let's do that to begin with. So I'm taking some of my ultramarine blue there. So I'm using the blue as the base, because to make a dark green you want to start with the strongest colour, and blue is stronger than yellow. So therefore you want to start off with your blue and add small amounts of yellow until you reach your desired colour. So a small amount of cadmium yellow, and there immediately we've mixed something that's very similar to the Country Olive. So let's swatch that. Okay, so that was the Cadmium Yellow and the French Ultramarine Blue. If I wanted to make that a little darker, I would go into the blue and add a little bit more until I'm happy with that. So we can make that nice and dark by going into that blue. So that's a lovely dark blue there. So that's more of the Ultramarine Blue. Okay, or we can bring it the other way. So we could add more yellow. If I do it on the side here, just mix up some of that colour. So we can make it more yellow. Let's add a touch more to that. Okay, so that would be a much more yellow green or a lighter green. That, in actual fact, is extremely close to the green gold that I showed you earlier. Okay, so if I were to mix, if I wanted a lighter green, I would always start with the yellow. So let's move on to the cooler colours. So let's start with the lemon yellow. Now just bear in mind that the yellow is always going to be weaker in strength than your blue, so you may well need a fair amount of that yellow to begin with. And then let's mix in some of the Coeruleum Blue, just a little bit, and it will give us a lovely bright apple green colour. If I wanted to go darker, I just add a touch more of the Coeruleum Blue. That's a lovely green. And you can keep going until you reach the shade that you want. If I wanted a darker green, I would have started with the blue at the beginning and then used small amounts of yellow until I was happy. Okay, so those are my cool shades. These are my warm shades. Now that one is dry, that's actually quite grey, the green that I've got at the top there. So I could add a little bit more yellow into that. In fact, let's do that now. Let's mix that yellow in with that green and let's add a bit more yellow. There we go. So we've still got a dark green, but by adding a small amount, excuse me, that's my phone again. I almost put it on silent. Just bear with me 1 second. Let's stop that from interrupting us. So here we've got a darker green there, and we've taken it back to a dark, and it's not as grey as that colour that we mixed there now. Okay. So we've got those basic green colours, but what I wanted to show you, they're quite natural in effect. If you look at the warm shades, they're already quite natural tones. These more apple kind of shades are nice and zingy, so that's great. You might want to use those for fruit or landscape in the summer where you've got a lot of bright sunshine hitting foliage and trees and grass and things like that. I tend to veer towards the more natural greens. I prefer those. But let's see what happens if I take a green, for example. Let's mix a green using the Ultramarine Blue, and instead of using the Cadmium Yellow, let's go to the cool yellow, the Lemon Yellow, and we get a different green again. Okay, so this one's the Ultramarine and Lemon Yellow. I will write all these down so that you know what we've got on here. And let's do the opposite again. So take some of the Cadmium Yellow, which is a really lovely buttery yellow colour, and some of the Coeruleum Blue, which of course is another opaque. So the Cadmium Yellow is opaque The Coeruleum Blue is also opaque, and that makes a beautiful green. And depending on how much of those colours you mix, so we might want to go a bit more blue, let's add a bit more blue to that. Or alternatively, we can add a bit more of that lovely, oh, wrong yellow, wasn't concentrating there folks. So back into the cadmium yellow up here, add some cadmium yellow to that, and we can get a lovely yellowy green colour there. So you can imagine these colours either in a landscape or on a leaf, if you were doing a close-up, a still life of a leaf or something like that. If the light was hitting it, you might want to use this kind of shade, and then where you've got the darker colours and the shadows, you might want to use this kind of shade. So this is really useful, really helpful if you do this process yourself with the colours that you have, your primary colours that are in your own personal palette. You will come up with different greens as well. But let me show you something else. So I can work on this part of my palette now. I want to show you what happens if you add a colour to neutralise it. So we all know that green, opposite green on the colour wheel, you have red. So if I were to take a colour, so say the Veridian here that I showed you earlier on, it's a very strong green, it's beautiful, but it's a little too zingy for me. So I would, let's bring my other palette back across, let's take some of that Veridian green, which is gorgeous, but let's try and neutralise it a little bit. So here's the Veridian green as it is, a little bit darker, but to neutralise that I can add a touch of red. So let's just pop a bit more on my palette there. Okay, and then let's see what happens when we add a bit of the, whoops, it's a lot there, let's take some of that off. Some of the cadmium red to that, and it neutralises that green straight away. And to me, that is just a little bit more useful a colour than the bright one originally. These are really great for abstracts and things, but I tend to go for the more natural tones, and that's really what I want to teach you today. So by adding that red, we've knocked that green back a little bit. We can do the same thing by adding blue. So we could take that Veridian green again into my palette, but if I don't want it to be quite so powerful, I could darken it up a little bit by adding some of the Ultramarine Blue. Can darken that colour, touch more green. So see how I'm adding a little bit of each colour. I'm not going crazy with the colour, I'm just adding a touch each time until I'm happy with what I've got. So that gives me a lovely kind of turquoise, beautiful colour there. So that's by adding a little bit more blue. Well, let's add a little bit of yellow this time. So go back to the Veridian there in my palette. Washing off my brush all the time, guys, so that my paint stay relatively clean. And let's add a touch of the cadmium yellow. Okay, and that's, oh, that's gorgeous actually. That's created a lovely, lovely green colour. That's really nice. Yeah, I like that one. That's particularly nice. Okay, so in your newsletter this month, I'm going to attach a photograph with the labels on of how I've created these greens, so you'll be able to refer to that yourselves. If you're not a subscriber to my newsletter, I'm going to post this on YouTube for everybody to see, and if you want to subscribe, just go to rebeccajarman.com and you'll find that at the bottom of the page, or there's a little pop-up that comes, and you can sign up to my monthly newsletter there. So in each newsletter there's lots of tips and hints and tricks on watercolour painting and other painting as well, yeah, sign up and see if I can be of help. So I like to give lots of little guides and things like that. So there's also loads of goodies each week, free downloads, resources and things. So yeah, sign up. So we've got so many different greens there, and apart from this bottom row, these colours have all been mixed using the Cadmium Red, the Cadmium Yellow, the Ultramarine Blue, the 3 warm colours, and we've used the 3 cool colours. Well, we haven't used the Crimson, but we've used the Lemon Yellow and the Coeruleum Blue. We could have a go at the Crimson. Let's see what happens. Let's again take the Veridian, because it's really not a green that I would use straight out of the tube or pan or whatever, the solid paint. I would always tend to mix it with something else. So let's now try it with a little bit of the Crimson. I think I wet this before, pre-wet it. Yeah, there's some Crimson. Mix it in. Excuse me. That's lovely. Actually, that's a lot of Crimson. Okay, so that's made a beautiful grey. But we don't want a grey today. That's interesting to note. We want a green, so I'm just simply going to put more of the Veridian in there. Mix that in. But that red helps to neutralise that green. And I'll show you what we've got there. So we've now got a lovely dark, much more user-friendly, I would say, green colour, which is fab. So there we have it. Easy ways to mix different greens using the 3 primaries. So go away today and have a little play with your own palettes. Stick to your 3 primaries to begin with, and then if you do happen to have any other greens in your palette, like any of these for example, I mean there's hundreds of different greens you can buy, probably not hundreds but quite a lot. If you do have some pre-mixed greens, try adding a bit of red to them just to neutralise them a little bit, and you might find them a little bit more useful to you. Okay, take care guys, thanks very much, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more of my videos. Take care.